great speaker, Sylvain Bureau, who has been a visiting scholar at Duke University back in the days. He still has a great memory from Duke, especially from the Fuqua Fridays, where MBA students are having wine and beer and playing some games. So it's good to spread this spirit beyond the campus and get this experience through your life. All right. I will ask you to kindly mute yourself during the presentation. In terms of the cadence, Sylvain allows the questions along the way. So please be curious and ask questions. We're planning to be on time and finish roughly in 1 hour. So half of the time will be presentation and then extensive Q&A. And so with that, I will start the meeting, which has already been started. We have a lot of topics at the business school, business community about effectiveness, optimization, agile methods, focusing on clients, processes, people. But we sometimes forget about leaders' motivation and this big why question by Simon Sinek that is asking like, why are you doing that? Some of the usual business methods are not really effective to answer that question, so you have to ponder and find it. And luckily, the art has a good methods and processes to help us, the business leaders, to find this answer to the why question and translate it to the public, to your people, and to yourself in the first place. So it's my really great pleasure to introduce our today's speaker at DukeGEN, Sylvain Bureau, the PhD from École Polytechnique. He designed the art thinking method, and he organizes regularly seminars at unique locations like Centre Pompidou, Musée des Beaux-Arts of Montreal, Blockhouse in Tokyo. He's been visiting scholar at Duke University, as I already said. Apart from Duke, he visited as a scholar UC Berkeley, City University of New York, and his research findings have been featured in various scientific journals such as Financial Times, Forbes, Huffington Post, Le Monde, France Culture, and Harvard Business Review France. So without further ado, Sylvain, the floor is yours. Please welcome to the DukeGEN.
Thank you, Sergey. Maybe just a technical point. Could you help me share my slides because I don't have the rights right now, I think.
You have the full rights now.
No, I have the full rights. All right, perfect. So let's go. So thank you so much for taking the time. I know that you are, almost all day on this Zoom craziness. So I really appreciate that you are taking this time tonight. So I'm going to introduce this method that I labeled art thinking. Some other people are also using this term, and we are sometimes collaborating with them. But I will explain what we have been doing with this notion. And this idea is a bit paradoxical, the title, because agile methods are supposed to be used to connect with clients, to take into account the feedback from clients. So here it's an agile method where we don't care about the client. So I will explain why and how it's going to work. As Sergey explained, feel free to interrupt and ask questions whenever you want. I'm going to briefly introduce myself with these pictures that I took in 2011 in Le Grand Palais. This is a famous building in Paris. And these pictures illustrate a bit my work, my interests, and what I'm looking for. So here you have two forms. One, which is very famous, very elegant, stable, which can cross its time. You know, it was built more than 100 years ago, and it represents a certain French heritage, a French culture. And there is another side, another form, which is much more recent and which emerged very fast with different forms, which are a bit more subtle, maybe agile. And people are rushing, you know, to see this new emergent form. They are intrigued. And we also don't know really how these two forms are going to connect, to interact. Are they going to work together, to confront to each other? So basically, you know, that's a bit about my life and my focus. I did my PhD in this school. I have been teaching to this kind of profile. So here we are in this kind of stable institution. I am now a professor at ESCP, which is the first business school created in the world more than 200 years ago. So another very stable institution. But at the same time, I am working on entrepreneurship and I am mentoring, you know, projects with very new, unique proposition, which can sometimes grow very fast. I'm doing that also with large corporations. I've been working, for instance, in 2014 and 15 with a special branch of Airbus because they are facing, as you know, new competitors which are completely disrupting the floor, like SpaceX. And inside ESCP, I have been a bit like an entrepreneur, creating this new institute, Jean-Baptiste Tessé Institute, which is based in all our campuses, so Paris, Madrid, Berlin, London, and Turin. And inside this institute, I developed the art thinking method that I'm going to present today with different artists, but especially Pierre Tectin, that you see here on this picture from Ford, Japan. Okay, I have no connection whatsoever with modern art and country art at the origin. So if you hate modern art, it's still fine. My only connection with art was with martial arts. So I did, you know, some judo, aikido, jiu-jitsu, French boxing, you know, a lot of things like that. Now my knees are broken, so I I cannot do that anymore. But my best drawing looked like that. So you know, you don't feel any problem if you are not good at drawing. If you play with me at Pictionary, you're probably going to lose. So I'm going to explain you more what I mean by art and what I'm interested in. To start this, I would like to share with you this piece and ask you a very simple question. And I would like you to answer if you agree on the Zoom with, you know, the yes or no button. So according to you, is it a piece of art? This form, this whatever it is. What do you think? You may already know this piece, but if you want to click in the chat and share with me your answer. So according to you, is it a yes or no? For you, not about history, but what do you think? No way, yes. What else? No, no. Okay, could be. Yes, in text, yes, could be. All right, so everything is art nowadays. So actually, do you know when was it created? Some people know this piece, maybe? Any guess? You can answer and take the mic. Any guess? 1917, yes. So some people already know this piece. So it's a piece from 1917, created by, so this is one of the most famous or maybe infamous piece of art created in all the 20th century. This is a radical shift in art from a famous French/American artist, because he was born French and he became American later on, Marcel Duchamp. So Marcel Duchamp is a key player in the art world, and he did this piece in 1917 in New York. Actually, there was a famous exhibition at that time which was called Armory Show. The Armory Show was a specific exhibition where you can present whatever you want. There was no formal jury, because maybe that you know that in France back in the 19th century, especially, you had this salon. Les salons were, you know, with a harsh, tough selection. And a lot of artists were feeling that, you know, these juries, they constrain a lot what we can do, and it's not fair, and we want to be freer, and to have more freedom to create. So they created this other exhibition, especially in France, but also in the US, with Art Morichaud. And Marcel Duchamp was part of this movement. He was connected with people like Picasso, you know. He had a family of artists. He was very good at drawing, very good at technical stuff in drawing and painting. And he wanted to make a joke. And he said, okay, guys, you pretend that you can welcome any kind of art. Let's try. Let's see how open you are. And basically, he bought this urinal, and he wrote Hermut because he didn't want him to be, you know, seen as Marcel Duchamp because people knew about him. And then the jury was like, okay, what's that? You know, it's just like you know, is it a piece of art? Can we say this is a piece of art? And basically, why is it a problem to present that at an exhibition? Can you, especially in 1917? So why is this probably not a traditional piece of art? What's wrong with this piece, according to you? You can take the mic, answer in the chat, whatever you prefer. Okay, so it's true that it has a function. So it breaks existing conventions. So first of all, this is
because it's performative.
In which way? What do you?
In which way? Because I put something here, and I say it's art. So it's like performance. It's just like that's what I say is art. I can tell you it's art, so it's pure performance. There's nothing. It's nothing like art. It looks like it's something we've been doing for the last century. Like everybody is doing Duchamp for the last century.
Yeah.
If you want my humble opinion, but yeah, performative. No.
Yeah. So basically, you know, at that time, art was supposed to be something that which involved craft. You know, it takes time. You need to have some know-how, some competencies, technical competencies. It was supposed to be, to some extent, aesthetics. And it was supposed to be, you know, different from the everyday objects, from our everyday life, you know. And this is obviously quite vulgar. And this is obviously something that the artist didn't create. So the artist basically only did a deviation. He took something from a context A, and he put this thing in a context B. And then he added the signature, and he shifted the orientation, okay, of the piece. And he said, this is a fountain. He called it a fountain. So when you do that, you create, you challenge the existing norm, and you challenge the existing criteria to assess an activity, to assess a project, to assess a result. And what is, I think, very interesting for us in the art history is that you don't have something like progress. You cannot say it's better. You know, you cannot say that this urinal is better than Claude Monet, or is better than Michel-Ange. You know, it doesn't make any sense to say that. You can only say it's very different. It adds a different perspective. And actually, you know, what's happening is that very big names in art, we remember them because thanks to what they did, thanks to their performance, they managed to create a new norm. And that's what interests me. It's how can we not do better what we have been doing. It's not about how can we optimize what we have been doing. It's how can we create new norms which can look like at first below the performance that I used to have. And this is critical because otherwise, if you cannot think of new norms, you are stuck in your habits, you are stuck in your frame, and your perspectives are very limited. And many artists did that. So for instance, here, Claude Monet is painted by Manet, Edouard Manet. And this painting represents a breakthrough in art history. Maybe that you know that artists used to be locked down. We talk a lot about our lockdown, but artists used to be locked down because they used to paint inside their studio. So even if you wanted to paint a landscape, you had to stay within your studio. And Monet was one of the first painters to escape the studio and to create a boat to paint directly close to the landscape. So this is also a shift in terms of norm. And this is what I'm interested in. So we have a question from Marcel about, not Marcel Duchamp, Marcel Liegenhag, about why should it be lower in terms of norm? Well, the thing about lower and higher, it's a perspective. Let's think about the cell phone. The first cell phone was crap, you know. It was super expensive, super heavy. It didn't work very well. So on average, the performance was lower. But if I was from the American Army, it was useful for me for some specific purpose. Same is true for digital picture. You know, the digitalization of the pictures and photography at first was lower on average, but you had some specific functionality like image viewing, which was better. So every time you have a shift like that, on average, the new radical innovation is lower in terms of performance. The first car was not very good compared to a horse. So it takes time sometimes to improve first. And also you are not looking at the same thing. You are not looking at aesthetic. What is super interesting with what Marcel Duchamp is how you can think about how to create value without craft, without a specific know-how. And this is very, very key in terms of how our thinking evolved in the 20th century. So here, what I would like to discuss with you is not how to learn to be better, but how to learn to challenge our values, which are driving what we do. On average, at school and in companies, we develop what is called the single loop learning. Based on our results, we adjust our actions and we try to improve and knowing a certain norm. But sometimes we may want not to learn, but maybe to unlearn, challenge our values, which are driving our actions. So let's give an example. Tonight, who thought, okay, I'm going to come to the Duke alumni meeting naked? Who thought that? Nobody? No one? Okay. Why? You know, why? There was a museum in Paris, Palais de Tokyo, which had one afternoon for naked people. We have a fraction of the wood in Paris, Vincennes wood, where you can go naked. There was a restaurant in London where you can come. I'm not pro-naked, guys. I'm just saying that you just have this question, oh, do I want to have a shirt or a t-shirt? You know, these are the questions we have. Great artists, great entrepreneurs have great, unique, weird questions. My goal when we are developing this art thinking method is not to find solutions. Our goal is to find new questions. Because if you want to change radically what you have been doing, you need to challenge your values and to find new questions. And this can be very political. I'll come back to that. And you know what? Human beings are made to create new norms. Being in good health as a human being means to be able to recreate norms depending on your environment, your health, your situations. And that's what's very interesting with artists, because they are very good at that, creating new norms. And of course, you know, I think that if you create a new norm, it may be better to connect this norm with your own motivations, okay? Because if you create a new norm for just like that, it not make much sense. So I'm interested in how can we find why we do what we do and why we could do something differently, things differently. And to give you another example, which is more business oriented, maybe you heard about Heldeman Julius. He was really at the extreme left of the political scene in the US at the beginning of the 20th century. And he was part of a famous newspaper at that time, which was really socialist. And thanks to his wife, who was more wealthy, he was able to launch a new project, which was called the Little Blue Book. Maybe you heard about this story. They sold 300 million books like that in the US with a very low price, which I think at the lowest price was 20 cents. And the idea of the guy was to diffuse ideas, ideological politics, which was not diffused at that time. And it was really connected to his political vision, to his political perspective, that blue collars should have a form of education. And because universities were too expensive, this little book, which you can have in your pocket, as a blue collar, was the best thing to do. So here you don't answer a market need. Nobody would ask you for this book. There is no demand in creation. You present something, and then it will react, and then you can adjust, of course. But at first, it's a proposition that you have to give and to share with the market. Maybe you heard about this author called Roberto Verganti. Roberto Verganti is an Italian, has been working with Harvard Business School, and he tries to express the different types of innovation. So the easiest distinction is between incremental and radical innovation in terms of functionalities and technologies. But you also want to think about how is it radical in terms of language, in terms of messages, in terms of identity, meaningfulness. If you think of Marcel Duchamp and the urinal, it's not a better piece of art. It's less, it's a degradation in terms of functionalities. But you completely and radically change the meaning of what a piece of art is. My art thinking is relevant when you want to change the meaningfulness of things, when you want to change their identity. And when you are doing this kind of thing, asking clients what they want, what they need, is not going to work very well because they don't know. When you create the first Walkman in Japan, you don't ask clients, they don't know what it means to have a Walkman. First iPhone, first, all this first stuff. Okay, you may want to know a bit more about the market, but you need to create a language. You need to create words. And that's what artists are doing. They are creating culture to make sense of the real world. Now the question is, why should we push this kind of innovation? Why should we develop radical innovation which are changing our mindset, our language, our perspective about life, about the real world? What's happening maybe these days, these years, which could require more of these things? What do you think? Because innovation for the sake of innovation is maybe tiring, What's happening that requires us to change things? Face of strain is accelerating. Okay, so we can just do more things. That's true. And maybe you heard about this. There's a very famous and interesting sociologist, Hartmut Rosa, who is a German sociologist, speaking about the process of acceleration. But to some extent, it's a bit silly. You just change because all the states are changing, and you are like a rat to some extent. So is there something else why we should? Okay, so what are the major problems that we are facing that needs to be addressed in a very new way? Okay, so we can talk about competition, but that's about the same, just like, okay, scarce resources. Thanks, Rafaela. Yes, I think problems are more complex, certainly. It's not so easy to apprehend, the reality, just like that. Maybe just to complement what you have been saying. Yes, thank you, sustainability. I'm going to address that. So basically, to make it simple, my perception is that the breakthrough in history was our capacity to create organizations which were able to produce certainty so that we can consume certainty. When you think of Coca-Cola, every time you drink Coca-Cola, you it's going to be perfect. The standard will be respected. Everywhere on earth, this is an incredible challenge that was addressed. And this is happening in healthcare, in education, in culture. And this is booming also thanks to artificial intelligence, which are helping us to do so. This is impressive, and this is extremely changing our life and improving our everyday life. Having said that, having said that, we have a big problem. This massification of certainty had big impacts which are not going to be sustainable. I don't know if you know this text. Do you have a clue about when and where was it written? Any guess? Recently, a long time ago?
Is it from the book, The Limits of Growth, the 1970s?
Yeah. Thank you, Jane. Exactly. So it's not from Trump. It's not from Donald Trump. It was written in 1972 by researchers from MIT, young fellows researchers from MIT. Basically, we know for a long time that what we have been developing is fraud. It's in terms of ecological impact. It's not going anywhere. And you know what? This is what's happening. You know, when you look at, so we are in this. You know the Anthropocene. Have you heard about this term, Anthropocene? So basically, you know, the climate change regularly on Earth. For instance, in the Jurassic era, the level of CO2 was higher than today. But what's happening today is that the climate is changing because of our activity. And this is what we see here with all this big impact. And the model that was developed by these MIT researchers was assessed in 2014. And basically what you see is the model is super accurate. So what they found is working, which is good for science, but which is very bad for humanity, because it means that they are right and that we have a big issue to deal with these days. So basically, the more we don't do anything, the more we're going to have to change radically in a fast mode in terms of CO2 production and CO2, because you know that when we produce CO2, it takes 100 years before it's over. So the more we produce CO2, the more we're going to have to change radically our consumption and production of CO2. So to make it very simple, the probable is becoming unacceptable for our planet. The probable of 1972 is the same as today in worst. So optimizing the probable, optimizing what we have been doing is killing us. I mean, is killing the biodiversity, is killing, you know, the climate, is impacting our everyday life. So the question that I think we have is how to create the improbable to say that, because we may not have a final answer, we may not have, you know, what we should do, but we know at least that we don't want to just optimize what we have been doing. So basically the question was raised by the French philosopher Paul Valéry, you know, is how what we have been doing can be changed and challenged in many ways. And that's a difficult question. It's a very difficult question. And we are facing that. This is a piece from René Magritte, the Belgian painter, which is called The Principle of Uncertainty. A lot of people talk about risk when it's referring to entrepreneurship, but you really need to differentiate risk from uncertainty. If you ask the best artificial intelligence machines to find the shadow of this woman, they won't find this bird, because artificial intelligence are going to compute all the shadows of all the women, of all humanity, but they won't find this bird. This is uncertainty. COVID-19 is creating many shadows like that. We had no clue that something like that could happen, and AI cannot deal with that. So our challenges are more about that. The big nightmares for governments, for top CEOs, it's not about managing risks. We are super good at managing risks now. The problem we are facing is uncertainty. Artists are not afraid of uncertainty. They are working with uncertainty, they are working in an uncertain context, and they are creating this kind of uncertain production, this kind of improbable propositions. That's why I'm interested, and we were supposed to have a conference at Le Louvre Museum in July. Because of COVID-19, we were not able to have this conference about artificial intelligence and artistic intelligence. I think that, you know, focusing only on AI is super limited. And we really need to address and connect with artistic intelligence. And I'm not the only one to say that. Maybe you know Scott Hartley. Scott Hartley is a former MBA from Stanford. And as you may know, in Stanford, they differentiate the world in two, with the fuzzy and the techie. Fuzzy are more like, you know, social sciences, humanities. And he claims in a book that you really need to apprehend the fuzzies, and it shows how in many corporates, many top unicorns, you have key fuzzies as founders, as executives. So I'm really trying to push that trend. So art thinking is a method to create the improbable with certainty. My assumption is that the probable is a problem. It becomes unacceptable in many, many contexts, and we need to find improbable solutions. Because we are not artists, because we are not so good at creative practices, because top managers are more into optimization, and because we don't have time to become artists, we created this method to help get access to this practice of creativity and creation. And what we did is through various researchers, we have been analyzing practices in art, in entrepreneurship, in science, to understand how to define and characterize creative practices. We organize them in this order to make it simple. And for each practice, we have theories, concepts, methods, and emblematic examples from history in art and different domains. Do you have questions so far? Are you happy? Yes, it's okay. You let me know if you want me to answer, if you have anything you want to. Art thinking is not against others. Art thinking is a complement to design thinking and business thinking. Art thinking is a way to reframe your problems, to question your questions, to unlearn. Once you have a new question, you can start and try a prototype, a solution through design thinking approaches with users, with beta clients. And once you have something better, then you go with business thinking, business model canvas, lean startup, all these things. So we are trying to complement the existing methodologies. And the focus is not on the product market fit, but on the fit between you and your project, between you as a creator and your project. To help people learn that, we created this workshop, the art thinking workshop, Improbable, which is basically like a scrum. You create teams, you have conferences, workshop, regular feedback, and at the end, you have a piece of art ready to be presented. So we did it in many different contexts, in Paris, as well as in Madrid, in Germany, in Turin, in Finland, in Armenia. So every time we had to test, the validity of our method with different culture, with different professional backgrounds, with entrepreneurs, with students, with executives. So this was with designers from Denso, the supplier in the car industry. We also with colleagues from Stanford. So here, Chuck Easley is a guy I met at Duke University, and I'm still in contact with him and working with him. So Duke has sometimes long life, journey. And as Sergei explained, we're working also with Museum, where we do this kind of workshop. So this is in the Centre Pompidou, which is obviously a very nice environment to work and present the show. And due to COVID-19, we also made all these things online with virtual art galleries, which are working quite well. In terms of impact, so we tested this model in very different contexts, and we can see that it has quite a positive impact on key competencies that need to be developed for many corporations and executives, which are more creative, the capacity to deal with complex problems, as was explained before by some of you, deal also with emotional intelligence, active learning, and of course, innovation, creation. Thanks to that, some people are developing entrepreneurial projects. So this is an example of a company which was created after this workshop and which is booming these days. But of course, there are many examples like this one. And the idea also is to use the radicality that you can use in art to test ideas. So for instance, some participants proposed to create sort of Netflix business school. And a few months later, they launched this real platform, Learn Combinator, to teach through kind of online videos and stuff. So you can also have, this kind of avant-gardist perspective with art. I can give you other examples like this Yellow Vest, which was created in 2012, way before the Yellow Vest movement in France. And this piece was about, how to connect links across people, between people, and how to make this link visible in the French society. It worked quite well. We also have, some pieces about the impact of the sharing economy and how it could create a sort of peer control and totalitarian control. And the idea is if you aggregate all the grades, all the rankings you have during the whole life that you are using in your Airbnb, Uber and stuff, you could create a global trust ranking. And as you know, the Chinese government is doing exactly that with the social credit to assess its population. Maybe a last example, which was created by executive MBAs from ESCP in Jan 2020. So before we had the lockdown in Europe and in the US. And this piece was about how could we reduce our zone, our space to one little room, because we are only doing things online and we don't need anything else. And 2 months later, we were exactly in this kind of mode, which was also interesting to discuss. Okay, some pieces are sold. I can talk about this piece later if you want. We have our thinking Instagram. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop there, and I can go deeper in one practice if you are interested. But maybe we can have first some questions.
Sylvain, maybe you can share some of the most impactful projects that really touched you as a result of those workshops.
Yeah, well, so I shared some, maybe I can share with you some a practice, a tangible practice that you may want to use, which is the practice of the deviation. So maybe I can switch that. And so to go back to Picasso, creation is a lot about stealing from others, and Picasso deviated these primitive art, which was more and more visible in France due to the French Empire. At that time, France was the second empire worldwide, so we had a lot of objects from Africa coming in Paris. And as you can see, he implemented some of these forms and aesthetics in his painting. So this is the deviation. Deviation is something that you take from one context to another. This is a very powerful practice to create that you can use and that you may already use in your own practice. But to make that happen, to be powerful, you at least need 3 layers. 3 enablers: the scenius, the heterotopia, and some critique. So the scenius at that time was the idea that you need a scene to collaborate with others to become a genius. So basically, big names in history, in entrepreneurship are never alone, and they are always in some very specific territories where they connect with others. They are challenged, they are finding complementary logics, friends. And if you consider Picasso, there was a huge amount of key artists, key people who made Picasso in many ways. So for instance, you had at least Georges Braque, who was a French painter, and they were really working closely as friends and learning from each other. You had also Guillaume Apollinaire, the French poet, who wrote a lot of things for Picasso to talk about the Cubists, to support the Cubism movement. You also had the sailor, people selling the pieces to make money for Picasso, like Daniel Henri Kahnweiler, a German promoter of Cubism. You also had Berthe Weil, a famous person who supported Picasso and giving him resources and money. So this is the scenius. And this scenius was in this crappy place at Montmartre in Paris, Le Bateau Lavoir, which was a very crappy space, but where you could do whatever you want. And you had a lot of Italian and Spanish artists there. And this is the heterotopia that you want also to have. Maybe you know Michel Foucault, French philosopher. He wanted to create this term to, so utopia, right? So utopia are places which are not physically existent, but where we can project a dream. Heterotopia are places which exist, but where you are not really in the world. You are a bit outside the world. So when you enter Bateau Lavoir, you can think differently. So if you think of, for entrepreneurs, if you think of a garage, the garage is typically this heterotopia. It's somewhere where your boss won't hit you. It's somewhere where your parents won't blame you. It's a place where you can, grow and try and do bricolage and experiment. This is really critical to have this kind of space. So the Bateau Lavoir was a great space at that time to do so. And then you need the critique. So you need to be protected, but at some point you need to show your work, because the critique, even if they are very harsh, they will help you understand what you are doing. So for instance, in the case of cubism, the term cube was coming from a critique. There was this critique, Louis Vauxhall, which said, Mr. Braque is making everything like a cube, like cubes. And this term became cubism. And if you consider other movements like Fauvism or Impressionism, they were also used by the critique. So this idea that the meaning of what you do is coming and emerging from the dialogue that you are having with different audiences, different scenes, which can sometimes be very critical. And deviations, once again, when you look at Picasso's painting, people at that time thought that it was below the norm. Same as with Marcel Duchamp. But do we have? So I can take some questions or show you the same practice in the business world. It depends what you prefer.
Yeah, there is a question from Rams about the composition of such.
So for these workshops, we had almost every kind of profile, from master students, executive MBAs. We had PhDs. We had top executives from a bank, from Galeries Lafayette, from Canon, we had entrepreneurs. We are working with entrepreneurs from HEC Montreal, for instance. So there is no profile, I would say. What you need is people who are willing to learn how to develop creative practices and willing to challenge their norms. That's all we need. And then everybody is welcome. That's the vast variety of profiles.
Have you had politicians that wanted to challenge the norms?
Good question, Sergey. I have a research project right now with my PhD about Emmanuel Macron and how he did, with En Marche to challenge the norm and become president of France. But we didn't do yet this workshop with politicians. That could be done maybe one time. That could be interesting. Correct.
I have a question.
Oh, please.
So in my high school in 1974, we read that book, The Limits to Growth. And that's why I remember it. It made a big impact on me. And so we didn't have the proof yet about how the earth was going to be impacted, but we knew. And business people, I remember when I studied economics at Duke in 1980 and getting very frustrated with it because economists were making assumptions about behaviors and they weren't taking into account the cost of getting rid of materials. I remember thinking that, the cost of the pollution. And so what's different today where leaders who want power and have the power that's going to make them embrace this? I mean, I understand it. I'm part artist, I'm a pianist, and I'm a life coach. And I've mixed at Duke. I had a piano scholarship and studied business. So I've always been mixing the two and felt it was a big gift. But still, the norms in business school, I work at a business school now, a typical one, KEDGE, people talk about it, but then when we get into the real world and money is still the driver, it doesn't happen. So I think your work's incredibly important, and I want to know if you think there's something today in time that will make us do it differently. Are we at a tipping point now?
Well, so, I use it. So maybe, Edgar Morin is also a French philosopher and sociologist. And basically, he said, in history, the improbable was very often the solution. And by definition, you cannot really predict how it's going to come, when it's going to come. And I guess that if you were in France, you know, in the beginning of the 40s, you had very limited hope about what's going to happen because of the Nazi domination. You know, the situation was horrible. If you look at what was the condition of women, you know, back in, for instance, in I think the 60s in France, you couldn't have a bank account as a woman without the authorization of your husband. So things are changing dramatically, and I cannot imagine that human being cannot change this trajectory. Having said that, obviously there is no simple answer. And for instance, this workshop, which is clearly sharing some facts that you seem to know, Jane, but a lot of our exec MBAs didn't know that. They didn't realize that the figures were so bad. They didn't realize that it was so urgent. And these people, they also have some children, you know, and some people may say, no, I won't do that anymore. I'm going to do it differently. And I think the norm is already changing, that some practices are not acceptable anymore. And I think that if you can integrate some of this info, some of these practices, this will not change radically, but all these little seeds, I think, will have an impact along the way. And I don't think that's going to be from one person. It's a movement which has to come from the top and from the bottom, and with different initiatives. And my role is to introduce a sort of subversive components from the extremists. I'm a sort of go-between, you know. I study and I analyze extremist activists in art, in politics. For instance, right now I'm co-working, I'm chatting in collaboration with a colleague studying the situation in Belarus, Russia, and how you have resistance towards the regime from Lukashenko. And all these oppositions toward the norm, you know, are very interesting to understand how we can be subversive at our level. And then, you know, some people claim that the problem is the capitalocene, that capitalism is destroying the planet. Some people are just thinking, no, it just, we can keep capitalism and change some other, I don't know. That's why I think also that human beings right now are a bit fed up with big ideologies because they were not very successful back in the days. And this idea that we just going to find our way along the way, you know, through emergent processes, through certain heuristics, logics, that could be a way to start without knowing where we're going. And artists, when they start a piece, they don't know where they're going. You know they have some intuitions, there are some motivations, but the things that they do, the reactions from others help them move forward, know how to continue. And I think that we are in this kind of situation. We don't really know, we cannot know where to go. So what we need is to know how to do things, how to act, how to change things at our level and share it with others. So that's a very big, complex, difficult question that you are asking. That's a very complex, difficult question that you are asking.
Sylvain, you put this method into perspective that it comes before the design thinking. Is it by purpose, and how does it unlock the power of other agile methods and the business concepts?
So I present it as if it was necessarily before, but it can come, you know, also more as a complementary logic in the process. So for instance, when you are an entrepreneur, you know, you do your stuff and then you pivot and you pivot and you pivot. And at some point you lose track of what are you doing? You know, why are you doing what you're doing? Because if you just pivot all the time, you lose the meaning of what you do. And art thinking can help you reflect on what's the core question that you want to address, what's the core challenge that you want to address, to give you some strengths and some perspectives. So it's really a complement. Then it can make sense to do it, you know, as a priority. And in many of our programs, we do art thinking at first, because first it's a way to introduce all the, you know, core competencies about entrepreneurial leadership, about agility and things like that. And it's also a way to think about why you do what you do. But I think it's also relevant when you start to be, completely focused on making things as an entrepreneur. At some point, I think you are so much into the emergencies, the everyday emergencies that you may completely lose the focus. And I think it's really critical. And if you, for instance, do you know the commercial 1984 from Apple? It's a very, very famous commercial. Mm-hmm. Let me see, I think I need to add. And this is a typical deviation, which is still impacting the brand Apple. One minute commercial, and that's still impactful. Let's watch it. It's a very short video.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the information purification directives we have created for the first time in all history. A garden of pure ideology where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests of any contradictory thoughts. Purification, of course, is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
Okay, so it was presented in 1984 during the Super Bowl in the USA. So as you know, everybody's watching TV during the Super Bowl. Do you know who did this video? So it was Ridley Scott, who was super famous at that time due to Blade Runner, among other things. And here it's a typical deviation. Okay, so you have a deviation because you have a context where it's 1984. And you deviate. What do they deviate? What do they take? They don't show any computer here. What do they deviate? What do they take to show their product, to show the purpose of their product? Any clue? What are the symbols that they are using, that they are deviating, that they are hacking?
Well, it's what you explained before, so breaking the norm. Everyone is doing the same thing. Everyone looks similar. Everyone's looking in the same direction.
Why do they show that? What was happening at that time? How was the computer market at that time? Who was, managing the scene as
the government, maybe. Is it still the government or the internet?
So
DARPA or.
So Rafaela, you refer to George Orwell, okay? So you may know George Orwell in 1984. So George Orwell and the book 1984 was about totalitarianism, control. And so who is the bad guy? So who is the controller in the real world? Huh? Not in the movie, but who is this person speaking to these people in gray in the real world?
I don't know if they're still thinking of Russia, if it's still post-Cold War or.
That's true, but this is
I don't think so.
This is an American evil for Apple. So who was leading the scene in the days in the computer business?
IBM.
IBM. Okay. So basically, they say that IBM creating a centralized system. They control you. You have no way to say anything. You just do what you have to do. We are in charge, we control, and you just respect what we have been doing. And this is only for men, and these gray men are the clients of IBM, basically. And then what do they, what else do they deviate? So there is this George Orwell environment, a kind of environment, and what else? Who is this? There is another key element in the movie. There's another one, actually. There's just one.
No.
The key actor, the woman with the
woman.
hammer.
The woman. And the woman is, she's not just a woman. She's a super athletic woman. You know, she's in color. She can, you know, she has a hammer. She can act. She can express herself. She's empowered. And then all these men, you know, these black, gray men, they are the past, you know. And I am going to free you, you know. And this is, of course, Apple. You know, this woman is Apple. And what it means is that you don't sell a computer, you sell freedom. So when you sell freedom, everybody wants freedom, right? So that's working. And even today, Apple is presented as this rebel company, as this, you know, company we can free people. This is, of course, today this is marketing bullshit. But back at the days, this was part of the DNA of the company. And this is made through deviation. Okay, so deviation are super powerful to create situations which lead to a new critique. Creation is not about creativity. Creation is about critique. How to challenge the norms. That's the core powerful of the creation. If you just want to improve and make it more nice and stuff, this is creativity. I'm not interested in creativity in that sense. I'm interested in how to challenge the norm, and to make that happen, because this is difficult, this is harsh, people will be against you, you need to have a strong critique. You need to be connected with you as a human being, as a citizen, with your political values. So it's not only about, is it a good or bad business model? When you do cryptocurrencies, some of these guys, they are libertarian. They are against the state. They are against our democracies. It can be fine, but maybe not if you are against that politically. A lot of companies today are changing not only our markets, not only our technologies, they are changing our societies. Twitter had a massive impact on the American democracy. This is not, you know, this is a company, but they had a huge role in our democracy. When you think of Facebook, they attacked privacy. This is not a social company, but they have created a huge, massive social impact. You like it, you don't like it, that's political. And then you make money, maybe with that. But if you don't ask these political questions, to me, you cannot do business properly. Airbnb is changing our cities. Tinder is changing the way we have love affairs. You know, all these companies, they are not only making money, they are changing our societies, and this is connected to politics. Our thinking is trying to address this political dimension. That's part of the process, and a lot of artistic critique are challenging, are not only challenging and improving the way to draw or to paint, they are asking questions to our society, to our politicians, to our elites. And that's, I think, what interests me. And I think what that was, for me, it was missing in many business schools.
Yes, Sylvain, this is also challenging us intellectually tonight. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up because time is running out, and we always want to stop at the time when everyone wants to have more, right, so that we continue next time with the with our events.
Just to wrap up, so first of all, thanks a lot for your attention. Again, I'm very happy to continue the discussion, you know, if you want to know more. And maybe just to end, I would like to share with you a final quote and maybe a final piece created during a workshop, improbable workshop. Just wait for the slides to come. But the computer is tired as well. Wait. Yeah, so there is this French artist called Robert Fillou. Okay. And he said, you know, l'art est ce qui rend la vie plus intéressante que l'art. So, wait, no, I'm not. He said, no, so art is what makes life more interesting than art. Here we go, sorry. So I'm really into that, you know. I think we are not trying to, you know, challenge artists in any ways. And a lot of people who are doing this workshop now, after the workshop, they respect much more artists and art than before. But it's how, you know, art can, you know, change our life. That's what interests me. And of course, to make that happen, it's not going to be very easy. It's not going to be very comfortable. Resistance, critique, subversion can be really harsh sometimes. And you go, you know, you do whatever you have to do. But this chair won't be able to sit, you know, it won't be very nice to sit. So that's maybe the final image I wanted to share with you. I'm going to share my email, and if you want to continue the discussion, and happy to know more about what you do, because it's a bit frustration for me not to know more about what you do on your site, and the website. So we have a website where we present where we present our activities. Okay. Thinking collective.
So Sylvain, is it possible to deliver workshops in a Zoom environment, or you have to be physically in one space?
So Zoom is perfect. Teams can work, but because I know that a lot of corporates, you know, they have our secretary stuff. So Teams, Blackboards, Zoom, yeah, we have been doing it, and it's really impressive how people can create stuff online. It's really quite amazing. Offline is still much more fun. You know, you can have a fine cocktail at the end and see people and track, but it's working very well online, and you can really experience something even on online environments. Yeah.
Great. Maybe the nearest event that you run online that people can join. You shared your email.
We're gonna have an event with Montreal, HEC Montreal. So it's gonna be 13, 15 entrepreneurs, and they're gonna have their exhibition in Montreal. So I can share with you the invitation. And if you want to have a look, discuss with the entrepreneurs, that could be a nice occasion to meet them. Here we go. So it's gonna be in May. So I think yeah, they speak English, obviously, and French. So you are very welcome to join this event.
Great. So Sylvain,
guys.
thank you very much for your time and sharing ideas. Yeah.
Enjoy life as much as you can, even if we are in lockdown or any kind of situations, and hope to see you in real life at some point. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the amazing presentation.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.